The Great American Plains, the riches of the Amazon jungles, picturesque islands and beaches. These are the wonders of the New World. You're not alone here, mind you. Upon closer inspections, natives can be found throughout this land. However, once you help these natives overcome their crippling oxygen addiction, it is time to establish a community, a society, no, a true colony, here in these variable paradises. So, with the natives considered a non-factor, what is stopping you from living the dream? Well, colonies tend to take time and money to build, a fact represented by the requirements of having 1k settlers in a province for it to be considered self-sustaining. The natural growth rate of colonies is pretty pathetic, but of course this can be increased, which is what we're going to be going for today. Let's go and get those global settlers. Disclaimers, let's start with the modifiers being stacked itself. Both Global Settlers Yelly and Global Settler Chance will be considered here. However, issues arise with Global Settler Chance and it also scales with things like production efficiency, which is something I'd rather not be scaling today as well. As such, the Global Settler Chance is more of a sideshow demonstration of what you end up with, instead of a true modifier stack in its own right. As such, given the choice, the priority will be on the Global Settlers over any Global Settler Chance if presented. And to be clear, I'll be focused on getting the largest number possible, so as in previous videos, I may end up sacrificing some permanent global settlers for more temporary ones if presented with the choice. Furthermore, I have a personal code of what I consider exploits and what I consider acceptable game mechanics. And today we'll be using a fun method of not spoiling the Reformation, which I count as an intentional game mechanic, albeit a rather difficult one at that. But I can see how some consider it an exploit. And I certainly have it in a grey area, even if it is within the allowed for this video category. If you disagree, feel free to disregard the quote-unquote permanent Portuguese age ability buff from the calculations. Otherwise, as always, standard setup, Ironman compatible, no customations. Let's go. So, yet again we find ourselves in EU4. This time, however, there are not going to be just two counters on the permanent global settlers and the temporary ones, but also a separate double counter for both temporary and permanent global settler chance. If projections continue by the 7th Lemon Cake video, the entire stream will be actually relegated to counters, and the video topic will hence have to be stacking literally every single modifier in EU possible. If you're a fan of counters, make sure to let me know by increasing both the like button counter and the subscribe button counter if you haven't already. But with that shameless self-shilling out of the way, let's get into the video. Our journey today begins in Portugal, but it certainly won't be staying that way. First thing we need to pick up as Portugal is actually going to be the Portuguese colonial growth age ability. Now this is pretty good, it's plus 50 global settlers, and this is something I'd rather keep. So, we need to now, well, stop the Reformation from happening. See, if the Reformation doesn't happen, the Protestant trigger for the Age of Reformation will actually never happen. This means that we never go to the Age of Reformation, hence we'll never go to the Age of Absolutism or the Age of Revolutions. We'll forever be stuck in the Age of Discovery. So all we have to do for that is prevent the Protestant Reformation from ever actually firing. The way we do that is to make sure reform desire never hits a large enough number to actually trigger it. The Pope is able to reduce it by spending money, which of course makes sense because spending money at a corrupt institution makes it less corrupt. It's just like rooting out corruption in EU4. However, it's quite hard to fight it naturally, since a lot of countries that are Catholic constantly get events that increase reform desire, and with a lot of those events stacking up, it tends to pop sooner rather than later. As such, there is only one very simple solution that you must do now. See, what we can see here on screen is a map of the Catholic provinces. Thankfully, some of them are already not held by Catholic countries, making them ineligible for getting those events. You are of course an exception, you as a player can choose to not get those events. But all these other countries, Germany, every single country in Germany to be clear, France, England, all of the Italians, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Poland, Lithuania, Hungary and Croatia, all of these wonderful Catholics, they need to go. They need to not exist. Either the land that is Catholic need to be owned by someone who isn't, like the Ottomans, so you can probably feed some to the Ottomans, or you go on a mad conquering spree and be done with Europe by the 1500s. In essence, you need to prevent every single Catholic tag from existing, as this will also prevent them from getting events. Catholic provinces can exist, of course, that is still fine, it's just the existence of a Catholic tag that is the issue. You yourself, of course, are again allowed to stay as Catholic tag since you can not fire the event, but yeah, you just kind of need to get rid of every Catholic. An incredibly easier said than done operation, since invading northern Germany by 1500s is relatively difficult, and you need to do not just that, but also yeet everyone else in Europe at the same time, and you have to do that as Portugal. Good luck. With the Reformation stopped and you having completed your tour of Europe, it's now time to form some tags. Unfortunately, Spain will not be one of them, despite having access to some other colonial shenanigans. They are an end tag, and the end tag that is actually best for colonialism, well, you'll have to watch the end of the video to find out. But the first pit stop we're actually going to be making is going to be Morocco, because then we can colonize the West for plus 20 global settlers, albeit for 20 years. With that done, we need to now move on to England, and much like most other domination mission trees, there's a lot of global settlers for us to pick up. The nice thing about England, of course, is you get access to all these missions, but England itself is a formable. GB is a end tag, but England is not. It allows you to pop England, get your fun missions, and move on with your life. We first start off just picking up 20% settler chance, albeit temporarily, for 15 years, a rather strong modifier, but one I would severely recommend. Next, getting back to the settlers, you need to chart the southern seas, getting 20 global settlers, as well as some tracering on the side. Since we are in the area, I would severely recommend picking up Dominating the New World, since until the end of the game getting some trade efficiency and global tariffs, as well as making all colonial subjects gain 50 trade efficiency, as well as 50 production efficiency. Then, settle Australia for 10 global settlers. We'll actually be forming Australia, so this is a good idea to get this going now. But that does kind of conclude what the access to global settlers from the British missions, but one thing we can do indirectly is pick up Parliament while we're over here in England. Namely, we're going to be looking at this thing from the Parliament debates, which is going to give us another plus 20 global settlers. It's theoretically possible to get this debate back to back forever, hence I'm going to be putting it into the permanent category, but I can also see its argument to be moved into the temporary category. Depends how you want to define it. It's possible to be permanent, but it's also realistically not going to be. Much like the expansionist trait, which I may as well mention here, but could have mentioned at any point. The expansionist trait is theoretically accessible permanently, but in practice it's not going to be. Regardless, it's here for the permanent modifier stacking, so into it goes. But we're not done with the British Isles. Now we need to move over to Scotland, where we need to go and pick up the Darien scheme. This is going to give us another 15 global settlers, as well as 5% more settler chance. Now this scheme historically famously united the two countries of England and Scotland, much to the protest of the English, who are now subjected by the evil tyranny of the Scots to this day. So it's a very successful scheme and one I would severely recommend picking up. And then form yet another non-end tag available on the British Islands. Well, Ireland. See, they have some more global settlers to pick up from here. But with the British Isles sucked dry of content, you need to go ahead and make your way over to the Hanseatic League and form them before access to the Hanseatic missions. Lubeck also has them, which is why I'm tagging into them now. What you're looking for here is to charter North America. This will give you access to not just 20 global settlers and a bit more colonial range, it'll actually give you access to a colonist, something I'm not keeping track of today, but very much a nice added thing to have on your side. But we are here for the 20 global settlers, albeit temporarily, so let's pick that up and move on. See, I'm assuming to this point you've stayed Catholic, and actually you'd probably want to switch back to Catholicism, since that is a good way of maintaining the Treaty of Tordesillas for plus 10 global settlers. It's only on the New World, so I'm not sure how I want to include it in terms of the permanent category. I think staying Catholic and just using Treaty of Tordesillas is a reasonable thing to do. However, to those not convinced with that argument, you have two alternatives. You can either go Tengri and get the Orthodox as your syncretic faith, plus 10 global settlers everywhere, or you can also become, well, any other pagan and become Totemist, and then get your global settler person remembered as an ancestor. This will give you plus 10 global settlers from the religion as well. These are the two options for plus 10 global settlers. There is one religion for gay gives you plus 15 global settlers, Protestantism. However, getting that religion kind of nullifies the whole being Portugal shenanigan, so we can't use that. So whether you want to use the Catholic Treaties of Tordesillas, the Tengri and Orthodox coalition of 10% global settlers from that, or you want to go and become Totemist, all three options will eventually provide you with plus 10 global settlers, and all three are equally awful to do. Well, the Catholic one is free, but it only applies to the New World, so if you are colonizing something like Taiwan, Treaty of Tordesillas isn't going to help you. But why am I staring at the Ming? Well, you see, you're not going to be staying any of these religions. You're going to pick up an Eastern religion, and you're going to go ahead and take the Mandate of Heaven, because you need to do some celestial reforms, namely the New World expansion for plus 10 global settlers. This is definitely going in the permanent category, since the Emperorship of China is something you can keep, even when you flip out of the Eastern religion. You only need the Eastern religion to pick up the Empire of China, but if you flip out of it later, you are able to maintain the mechanic. While you're in the area, you're also going to need to move your capital to any one of these wonderful Australian provinces. With that done, you'll be able to form Australia, which you actually need for their ideas. Namely, we're going to be looking for the global settlers from the Australian opener. which is not as perfect as some of the Native American formables, however those we kind of don't have access to without serious exploits, but this is just technically achievable within the intended mechanics of the game. As such, we'll be using Australia for their global settlers. But don't worry, our final formable is the end tag of France, because much like any other country that had a domination update, they have some pretty overpowered stuff inside their mission tree. And in this case, it's going to help us colonize the world. Now, this mission for the Kingdom of Spain, for our first global settler increase, actually involves some shenanigans. We're going to need to revive Castile at this point, and you're going to need to make sure they aren't, well, Catholic, since they're going to be going ahead and forming the Reformation if you do. Furthermore, you probably want to kind of hem them in before you do this mission so they don't colonize and get in your way. But if you do all that and pop this mission diplomatically as an ally, both of you will gain some global settler increase, only it's going to be a lot more useful for you as a permanent modifier than for a Castile you've hopefully hemmed in the process. Then go ahead and discover North America for 5% more settler chance and 25 global settlers for 20 years. Found French Haiti and hopefully just pray they don't revolt for another 10% settler chance and 25 global settler increase for 20 years. And that kind of concludes the missions that give you global settlers as France. Of course, you are still France. There's a lot for you to pick up that is incredibly powerful, from trade efficiency from taking over the English Channel, getting some naval superiority for navally defined maximum extra flagships, as well as the only good thing out of the maritime missions. And of course, the completely balanced 0.2 flat goods produced and minus 5% dev cost until the end of the game, because who doesn't love that? But with all that said and done, what else do you need to do? Well, there's a lot of ideas for you to pick up. Namely, after you get rid of the diplomatic ideas you used to conquer, well, Europe by 1500s to abuse that province full score cost modifier, you should pick up exploration for 10 global settlers, expansion for both 20 global settlers, as well as another 5% settle chance on the side, administrative for the policy, followed by plutocratic ideas, followed by humanist ideas, and then quantity ideas, and then innovative before finally concluding with offensive. Now, if you don't like offensive, you can also become a horde and get horde ideas here, but I don't know why you do that, since they both have basically the same effect. If we had another idea slot, we would be becoming a horde, but we don't, so we don't have to worry about that. We pick up the Pioneer Policy for 5% settler chance, then the Colonial Administration Act for 5% settler chance and 10 global settlers, the Native Assimilation Act for 10 more global settlers, the Colonial Companies Act for 10 more global settlers and colonial range, pick up Exile Colonial Companies for 5% settler chance, but more importantly grab the Moral Principle for a diplomatic possible policy, which will give us access to another 15 global settlers as well as some more native uprising chance reduction. Oh, and I also didn't mention it, but grab another 20 global settlers from repressing the natives in question. Unfortunately, there's no other easy source of diplomatic policies. There may have been some shenanigans we could have done earlier, but I'm not stacking settler chance here, so I'm happy to ignore it. We now move on to the military policies, where we need to pick up the colonial garrisons for 10 more global settlers. But with that, we conclude the policies with a very impressive 55 more global settlers. Then, make sure you keep your burghers so you can grant them New World Charters for another 5% global settler chance and another 10% global settler increase. Get yourself Tech 32 for another plus 150 global settlers. Pick up trading in cotton for plus 20 more global settlers there. And finally, we get to the events. There's a couple for us to pop. Firstly, there's this one that requires you either activating exploration or expansion ideas, which, regardless of your choices, will give you 15 local settlers. I'm going to put this in a temporary category because not only is it a temporary event, it's also for one province, so it's more of a seeing how big one number can go compared to, well, actual global settlers. Hence, well, like most of the events, that's where it's going to be going. Next, you want to have the Jesuit Mission event pop, so you need to make sure you have the country modifier adequate for that, which will give you 10 local settler increase in that province when it does fire. Then you want to get colonial expansion, which requires you to, well, have less than 3 colonies going at the same time, or plus 15 local settlers on the province. However, to the best of my knowledge, that actually kind of concludes the events that gives you global settlers. That is a very impressive amount of settler rate. I mean, again, this is more of a pushing the theoretical limits, and I'd be very incredibly surprised if anyone manages to achieve anything close to this in a real game, but I hope you found it at least educational and entertaining nonetheless. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next one. Bye!